fate of the skies calls upon the might of your crew. The time to reveal the truth has come.
After a developer change and nearly a decade in development, Granblue Fantasy Relink has finally arrived. For most games, living up to expectations after that long of a wait is nearly impossible. However, Relink not only manages to meet those expectations, but surpass them in surprising ways. Its structure isn't exactly that of a traditional JRPG, but it nonetheless manages to delight from its opening cutscene to its robust suite of endgame activities that will keep you hooked long after the credits roll.
Come, the stars await, and we mustn't keep them.
The Granblue Fantasy franchise originally began on mobile devices nearly 10 years ago, with subsequent fighting game spin-offs and a 12-episode anime releasing in the decade since. While Relink does its best to catch you up on the Skyfaring crew's adventures, it doesn't exactly start you at the beginning. It feels a lot like the E series in that knowing the backstory of the various characters would help you, but isn't wholly necessary for this particular adventure. For those interested, Relink offers up Fate episodes, short voice segments that give you some backstory on each playable character. However, they're little more than text on a static image. They feel low effort and aren't super compelling, but I appreciate the fact that the development team provided them for those unfamiliar with the characters. Plus, they give you bonuses each time you complete one, so they're absolutely worth doing. As for the story itself, your crew are searching for a mysterious island called Estalucia. However, along the way, a nefarious group calling themselves the Church of Avia impedes your progress. For as little as I said, saying any more would risk spoiling the story, so I'll just leave it at that. To be honest, the actual plot isn't much to write home about. It feels like the story is set up in service of the gameplay instead of the other way around. In a shocking twist, Relink is much more set-piece heavy than I ever expected. One quest, for example, has you battling a massive dragon on an airship, with another having you trying to figure out how to topple a massive titan. I bring this up because it feels like the development team thought of cool set pieces first and tried to figure out how to string them together with story, rather than writing a compelling story first and then figuring out the gameplay later. That may sound like a bad thing, but I actually quite enjoyed it. The story was all killer, no filler. Every single quest brings something unique and constantly one-ups itself until the very end. I was constantly surprised at how many new gameplay elements Relink introduced, even up until the final boss. And you've heard me say quest a few times, and that's because Granblue Fantasy Relink is structured via quests rather than one seamless connected world. Having followed the game for a long time, I had a feeling that this is how the game was going to be structured, so I wasn't too disappointed, but I can totally understand why someone would be. In terms of the characters, I feel like none really shine too brightly from a story perspective. None really stood out to me outside of Lyria, who's more or less the main character. Oddly enough, I feel like the characters' personalities shine through much better in combat than they ever did in cutscenes. The way the party banters back and forth and how each character's animations play out make them all feel unique. I do want to give special recognition to the cutscenes. These are some of the most dynamic and high quality of nearly any JRPG I've played in the last decade, second maybe only to Final Fantasy XVI. But the big difference with Relink is that the cutscenes here are way shorter. They get to the point and then you just get right back into the combat. It took me about 13 hours to see the credits roll, however there's a sort of part 2/epilogue a la Dragon Quest XI where the story continues. In total, it took me about 25 hours to see everything the story had to offer. While it certainly wasn't the best story I've played in recent memory, the actual act of playing the game was incredibly fun.
Shine as one, absolute zero!
Granblue Fantasy Relink is an action RPG through and through, filled with high-intensity spectacle and incredible boss fights. At the beginning, you'll choose either Gran or Gita as your main character. Whoever you choose needs to remain in the party until you complete the main story, but thankfully you don't have to control them. You can select any of the 20 playable characters to control in combat. Sadly, you can't swap to other party members mid-combat. You're locked to that character until the quest is over. To be honest, I didn't really mind that. I don't even know if the game would have been better off if you could do that. I like being in the flow of a single character for each quest, as they all had specific skills and roles. For example, Io specializes in attacking from range, stunning enemies, and occasionally healing, while Lancelot is a close-up brawler just trying to inflict as much damage as possible. As previously mentioned, Relink is mainly structured via linear quests, with the main objective being clear at all times. Most story quests consist of fighting your way through a level, culminating in an epic boss fight at the end. Some levels do have the occasional distraction like shrouded treasures. These are sort of short mini-games where you need to collect crystals before a timer runs out. If you do, you're rewarded with a treasure chest full of awesome items. However, some quests are more set-piece oriented, like boarding an enemy airship, disabling it, and escaping before it crashes. Despite Relink being structured more like a mix of Monster Hunter and even Uncharted rather than a traditional JRPG, that doesn't take away from how fun it is. Nearly every second of the main story campaign was an absolute blast, and I think that's all thanks to the game's excellent combat. Each character is given a light, heavy, and link attack, along with 4 slots to equip special abilities. These abilities can be anything from a strong attack, a stat-increasing buff, or healing the whole party. you're also given a dodge and a block. To say the least, you're well equipped to deal with the intense combat encounters. What makes Relink so compelling, and one reason why I compared it to Monster Hunter, is that each character's skill loadout is so incredibly unique, almost unbelievably so. Rackham, for example, attacks from range and is all about keeping his heat meter high as possible so he can do more damage with his attacks. On the flip side, my favorite character, Fairy, is a mid-range fighter who's all about trying to keep her ghostly pets out as long as possible. To say the least, I had a blast trying out every character to see what their unique moveset had to offer. No matter what your playstyle is, there's sure to be a character for you. And what makes combat so compelling is how well it balances the spectacle while providing as much information to you, the player, as possible. There's also constant spots on the ground indicating that something in that area is about to land on you. These MMO-esque markers are mainly reserved for boss fights, which are incredible. They can sometimes feel like bullet hell shooters with how much of the screen is full of attacks you need to dodge. But when you manage to dodge those attacks successfully and the enemy's rage meter depletes, it feels all the more satisfying. Now, if you don't dodge them and your HP depletes, you'll enter a critical state where you'll need to either use an item to resuscitate yourself or wait for your allies to come and heal you. I will say that your party member's AI is shockingly good. They heal you at the appropriate times, will stun enemies when they're powering up big attacks, and will even revive you as soon as possible. I never worried about them, which made playing Relink solo all the more enjoyable. Maybe my favorite part of longer boss fights are your skybound arts. These are your super moves that you can execute once your meter is full. If your entire party's meters are also full, you can chain 4 of them together for a full chain and dish out big damage. Timing these just right is super important so you can pull off full chains every time. And despite how many times I pulled them off through playing, they never got boring. Now, outside of quests, you'll spend the majority of your time in Relink's 2 main hub towns, Fulka and Seed Hollow. Here you can pick up side quests, improve your equipment, and trade in items. Scattered throughout each town are hidden items and chests full of useful items. While each of these towns could have simply been reduced to menus, I really appreciate the fact that the development team gave us these huge, gorgeous towns to walk around and explore. They never fail to wow me. On top of upgrading equipment, each character also has a deep mastery tree to fill in. They're similar in a lot of ways to Final Fantasy X's sphere grid system, with each mastery giving you more HP, attack power, or increasing the effect of an ability. At first glance, they may not seem that big, but after 40 plus hours and diving deep into the post-game content, I still haven't completed a single character's mastery tree. Speaking of the post-game, once you complete the main story, a swath of new quests become available, with even more unlocking after that. There's a seemingly endless amount of content to undertake, and depending on what your endgame goal is, you could easily sink 100 plus hours into Relink. Now, in terms of what those goals could be, they could be anything from finishing every single quest, crafting the best weapon, to fully finishing a character's mastery tree. And what's crazy is that if you finish one character, there's 19 other characters to fully level up. Well, I guess technically 18, since you can't have Jita and Gran on the same file. I've been absolutely addicted to Relink's gameplay, and I don't see myself stopping anytime soon. If you love games like Monster Hunter, then the endgame will be right up your alley. If not, there's still plenty of fun to be had, but you might not be as compelled to finish it all. Lastly, I want to touch on some of the quality of life features Relink has in store. It's like the development team has been monitoring other games and added everything to make playing this game as seamless as possible. For starters, every time you craft a new weapon, it'll ask you if you want to auto-equip it, and when you level up weapons, it'll just pick the best items for you so you don't have to really think about it. Next is fast travel. If you have a completed side quest, if you just go to your menu, it'll automatically teleport you to that quest giver instead of you having to run around town to find them. It's so nice. And after completing the main story, you can even fast travel to the various vendors throughout town, also just making it super easy. Now, when you're trying to collect items either to turn in for a side quest or to craft the next weapon, you can wish list those specific items, and when you go to take on a particular quest, you can know which of those quests has those items that you need to pick up. Super nice so you don't waste your time grinding on useless quests. Lastly, if for some reason you want to skip the cutscenes, it gives you a brief summary of what happened in that cutscene, which is so nice. I mean, I feel like if you're going to skip the cutscene, you probably don't care anyway, but if you just want to get on with it, it's nice that they have a brief summary available. Also, there's a wide range of options depending on your skill level. You can play on either easy, medium, or hard, with another difficulty unlocking after you beat the game, and there's also a couple assist modes. These kind of take away some of the functionality while you can just focus on the combat, or you can simply just move your character around and then the game will take care of things like using potions and pulling off special attacks. If you're watching this and consider yourself an action game veteran, I would play on hard from the very beginning. There were times when I was probably 10 levels lower than the enemies I was fighting, and I was still beating them with relative ease, so if you want a decent challenge, definitely play on hard mode. All in all, it feels like the development team thought of absolutely everything, and it just made playing the game an absolute pleasure.
What a vast expanse. It's easy to forget sometimes.
From a presentational standpoint, Relink is absolutely stunning from top to bottom. I played on PlayStation 5 and it ran at a silky smooth 60 frames per second from start to finish. I never had any hitches, crashes, or bugs in my 40 plus hours of playing. Visually, the game looks absolutely gorgeous. From the small details of each character, to the monster designs, to each environment, and even the game's menus. Now don't get me wrong, this ain't no Persona 5, but their simple elegance work perfectly. I never felt lost or found myself digging through menus trying to find something. I do also want to give special mention to the game's world. It all takes place on these floating archipelagos, which constantly took my breath away. I loved exploring every inch of each level, in particular the towns. Man, they're just so gorgeous. The music is also incredible. No matter the town theme, story theme, or battle theme, I found myself pausing my podcast so I could take in the full soundscape the game had to offer. I even found myself humming a number of tunes when I wasn't playing the game, which is surely a sign of great music. And while he wasn't the composer on this game, the original composer for the mobile game of Granblue Fantasy was none other than legendary composer Nobuo Uematsu. Granblue Fantasy Relink is an absolutely incredible video game. From its bombastic story campaign to its massively diverse roster of playable characters to its visually stunning presentation, I absolutely fell in love with it. I haven't been this blown away by a video game in quite a few years. If you love action RPGs, this is an absolute must-buy. And I know we're in the middle of a crazy release schedule between Like a Dragon, Persona, and Final Fantasy, but I promise you this game will be worth every single penny. Very few games deliver at this level of quality, polish, and sheer amount of content. It's totally worth supporting, and I hope you join me online in venturing across this Granblue skydom. Now, Relink is just one of many exciting JRPGs set to release in 2024. To see what else is coming this year, be sure you check out this video right here. And special thanks to Reset Switch, Tyler Kuzawa, and the Miyazaki Man for supporting me over on Patreon. To get exclusive videos and other cool perks, consider supporting me over on patreon.com/thegaming shelf. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you next time.